But I really truly have faith and belief that everything is always working out for the highest good. And there's nothing that I can do to get involved with it to make it be any different. My only mission here is to be a shining light, an example that we really do recover. And that if recovery is possible for me, it's literally possible for anybody. If transformation is possible for me, it's literally possible for anybody. And so I try to keep that in mind when I'm judging people.
Betty, how's it going?
Hey, Joshua, thanks for having me on. I'm super excited to be here.
I am thoroughly excited. I heard your story. Actually, I think I've watched a couple of your videos telling the story, and I say story, it kind of lessens it. Just saying that the experience, lots of experiences, is very dynamic to say the least. And I really wanted to have you on because I talk to people, tell them that my purpose is to raise their vibration, which literally just means, make you a better person than what you are today. And I think the only way to do that is through trials and heartache and things that happen, and telling people stories. But I really wanted to have your story on because I could tell everybody about your story, but it's not going to be the same as you telling it. You're a lot better at it than I am, and you're a lot easier to look at than I am. So, but yeah, go ahead if you don't mind. I'm just still the show and just tell me what everything that
Yeah,
happened.
yeah, I'll get into the all of it. We'll start at the beginning. So I was born on a snowy Wednesday evening. No, I won't go that deep. But yeah, I have experience of extreme contrast in my life. I
Yeah.
grew up very impoverished. I grew up in a drug addicted family line. My whole family is like a perpetual cycle of trauma, sexual trauma, physical, emotional trauma, and addiction and poverty and everything that goes along with that. And I grew up thinking that that was all very normal. Like I thought that it was normal to steal your groceries or, like we always had a long orange extension cord that went from our apartment to somebody else's to have electricity. And when I would go to friends' houses and they didn't have that, I was like, how are your lights on? Like I didn't really understand that the life that I was growing up living was so different from other people's. And yeah, so I found using substances in my own life at a very young age because it helped me to deal with the discomfort of life. I had endured a lot of trauma in childhood, and I found something that made me not feel that way, not feel that trauma. And I learned that from my parents. I would watch them either take a pill or smoke something or drink something, and their mood changed. And so I made all these mental notes. In 2007, my parents, they were like hitting a new bottom in their life. They were also addicts. And the lights were turned off, the gas was turned off. They were about to be evicted for like the millionth time. And they made this decision that they had to stop using drugs to end their suffering. And they did that by committing suicide with one another. And I was 23 when that happened. My sister was 18. We found them. They left these little short notes. They were written on kitchen notepads. And they didn't really explain anything, but they didn't really have to because, in some weird way, I knew exactly what they were going through because I was dealing with my own addiction. And I know how painful withdrawals can be. And I didn't really understand the desperation of their current state. Like on the verge of homelessness and like having no money and all of these things. But I would figure that stuff out later on in life. After my parents died, like my life became chaotic and my addiction became my parent. It's like this very loud voice in my head that said, like, I'm never going to leave you. I'm going to be with you forever. I'll never abandon you. It's me and you against the world. And it was the voice of my addiction. And so I just stayed with I stayed tethered to my addiction throughout my life. It came before every relationship, every family relationship. I abandoned my sister. She was just a little, she was 18. I just left her and I said, like, I'm going to go. And I moved across the country and I left my husband and like my whole life behind, and nothing was more important than me staying sedated and medicated with alcohol, with drugs, with men, with food, anything that I could get my hands on just to not feel. Like my feelings felt like they were way too big for me. And I moved to New York, and again, like my addiction came first. So I got married again. My husband wanted to not stop using drugs. I said, no way. I chose my addiction over my husband. And I kept doing that over and over again. Came before every job, every friend, everything. And I ended up overdosing in March of 2019. And I had this really transformative spiritual experience where I went to heaven. And I was a militant atheist before my experience. I mean, I just told you about my backstory, so God doesn't really fit into that picture. I really resented if there was a God. Like, why are all of these terrible things happening to me? And so I stayed hidden from God my whole life. And then I had this spiritual experience where I was like talking to God. And I was like so pissed that I was wrong. I couldn't believe that I was wrong. And I'll take you through the spiritual experience with me. So first, I experienced what I imagine is kind of like a life review, and I was feeling all of the emotions from myself and the people involved in certain situations in my life. So, being a drug addict has a lot of things that come along with it. I was a liar, a manipulator, a thief. I caused a lot of harm. It wasn't
So
just
I
like
got
I
a
was, yeah.
oh, sorry, I have just a really quick question. So did you like suddenly have unless I might have missed it. Um like were you dying? Like did you have an overdose and you didn't realize it?
I had an overdose. I don't think that I technically died. Like I was very conscious for my spiritual experience. Like I don't have any piece of paper that says that I died, so I don't claim that I had a near death experience. But I
Yeah.
did have a near death like experience. I had like
Okay.
this activation, this awakening, and today I have some language for it. It's called a Kundalini awakening, and Kundalini translates into different areas, into different words, but basically it means life force. And so I had this life force energy activation awakening. In the Western world, we might call it receiving the Holy Spirit. I had like this moment where all of a sudden I was completely lit up. And it seemed that when my third eye and my crown chakra, by the way, I didn't know what a chakra was. It's an energy center inside your body, in case you don't know. When my third eye and my crown opened up, it was like my spirit shot out of my body and went into this space of eternity. And, like as I was traveling to this space, this life review started to take place. And I was experiencing things from my point of view and the other person's point of view. And I had done so much harm. I mean, like so much harm to other people. I really had. And so I was feeling all of that. And so it felt like I was trapped in hell. I didn't know what was going on. All I knew was that I was feeling the worst feelings you could possibly feel. And it felt like I was trapped in them. And then I experienced my parents' suicide. I experienced it not only from the perspective of a grieving daughter, but also from their perspective. So I felt myself drowning in an ocean of anguish and suffering and despair. I thought that it would never stop. And I literally felt like I was stuck inside of hell. And then I started to hear these masculine voices, and they presented themselves to me, and I could tell who they were right away. And two of the voices that were very distinct, one was my father and another was a boyfriend that I had that had recently passed away. And I kept hearing them say, you are worthy of all the love in the universe. You are worthy of all the love in the universe. And so I kept following their voices, and I found myself in the light. And out of those really dark, low feelings that I was just feeling, and now I was kind of flooded with this feeling of unconditional love. And it looked like I landed on the deck of a spaceship, and it looked a lot like the Gravitron ride at carnivals. It's like a big spaceship, and like it spins really fast. You can throw yourself up against the wall. It felt like I came out of the side of one of the walls, and I found myself in this scene. And the scene was that there was like thousands of other souls, and there was a commander in the center, and you can call that commander Christ or Krishna or Buddha, some sort of like ascended master, some sort of higher entity was like gearing us all up for this trip to Earth. And like we were all pumped and we are like, let's go, everybody's like hooting and hollering and shouting and so excited. And I'm seeing everything in my mind's eye like simultaneously. So that's one scene that I'm aware of. And then my awareness turns to another scene, and I find myself in front of this table of beings. And they didn't tell me who they were, but they didn't have to, because I most definitely knew that they were people that were in charge of something. Like I don't know who they are. I still don't claim to like know exactly what entities they were, but they were most definitely in charge. And they had this big book, and they were thumbing through the book, and they were like, okay, it's good to see you. You're not meant to stay here right now, so we're going to get ready to send you back. And I'm like looking around me, and I'm like, you guys aren't talking to me, right? Because like, I don't know where I am, but it feels awesome. And I am definitely not going back to where I just was. Like that was terrible. Like, this seems really cool. Like, I'm going to stay here. And they were like, no, you just saw, like you're part of a spiritual army, and you're on a divine mission. And so you have to go back and finish the mission. And like you're not supposed, you're not meant to stay here yet. And they said, we're going to take you through the details of your pre-birth plan so that you have a little bit more information for the mission when you go back. And they took me through the plan that my soul had made for myself before I came to Earth. And it looked a lot like a video game to me. And that could be because of the generation that I'm born in, or because we're living in a simulation. You can pick. Either way, I was taken through what looked like a grocery store. And there was a man guiding me through, and he had this big empty grocery cart. And lining the walls of the grocery store aisles were these giant cereal boxes. And each cereal box had a life experience on it. And so I, as a soul, start going down the aisles. The guy says, okay, pick your life. And I start grabbing every cereal box, okay? I'm talking about like major adversity. I pick my gender, my ethnicity, where I would be born, the family line that I'd be born into, my parents. I pick addiction. I pick poverty. I pick prostitution. I pick molestation. I pick all of these really adverse things. And then I start picking cereal boxes that have, like awesome life experiences on it, like soulmates, kindred spirits, overcoming, recovery, being an author, being a speaker, being authentic, like all of these awesome things. But none of those things had happened in my life yet, so none of them resonated. So I was like, that's lovely cart filler. And I just kept going along, like witnessing the experience. And once I was taken through this pre-birth plan, I realized that I am not a victim of the world I see. I am not a victim of my circumstance at all. I am actually a divine co-creator of my experience. And it felt like 2 tons of bondage had been released from my spirit. Things had no longer happened to me. They had happened for me, because on some soul level, I had chosen it for the evolvement of myself. And my human cannot understand how some of those experiences could evolve me as a spirit. But today I have like unwavering faith that my soul knows exactly what's going on and picked the things it had to pick for whatever reason it did. And I don't have to understand it in my human form. I can just trust and believe that whatever is happening is for the highest good for all. So, like I'm downloaded with this whole pre-birth plan, and I'm feeling much lighter and happier. And I see myself back at the table of beings, and I'm like, wow, thank you guys for all of this information. I feel so much better. I will still not be returning to Earth, but I do feel a lot better. So thank you so much. I just try to like scurry off. And they're like, no. They said, listen, the first half of your life was boot camp, and the second part of your life will be carrying out your mission. It will not be nearly as challenging. You're going to have spirit guides. You're going to have friends, mentors, teachers along the way. And, trust us. And I was like, I do not trust you guys. I said, you don't actually tell us what Earth is going to be like. It is way more challenging than you let on. And I will not go back. And they said, this is not a punishment. And it's not that long that you're gone for. And that was a fact. Like when I entered that space of eternity, it felt like my whole 35 years of life at that point in time was like 1 second. I couldn't even remember anything from my life when I found myself in that space, because it really felt like I was waking up from a dream. And they said, like, this is not that big of a deal. You don't have to be so attached to all of it. But you definitely have to go back, because you have to finish balancing this life. They said, if you decide that you don't want to go back into her, meaning me, this body, then we'll show you the baby that you'll be born into that will, be on the mission to finish what you started. And so they showed me this little baby and everything about her. And she was going to have to basically live the exact same life that I had already lived. But she was going to be born into a different family line where she had even deeper levels of adversity. And I was like, damn, if these are really my only options, to go back into her or to start from zero, I guess I'll just go back into the body that I came here in. And I was like, but I'm telling you guys right now, she's glitched. She needs way too much healing. I don't think that this is going to be possible, but whatever. And, again, they told me to trust them, and I just like rolled my eyes, and I found myself sifting back into my awareness. And, that was my spiritual experience, and it was profound, and it could have been life-changing, except that I just wrote the whole thing off as drug-induced psychosis. All I knew was that I took a bunch of drugs, and then all of a sudden I thought I was talking to God. This was not part of my picture. It didn't make any sense to me. And so I just went about my life living it the way that I had always lived it, by using drugs, manipulating people, prostituting myself to make money, to get drugs, and then like rinse and repeat, do the same thing over again. And I was in this vicious cycle that I could not escape. So it didn't matter that I had this spiritual experience. I was mentally and physically tethered to my addiction. And then the universe, God, source, stepped in this really loud way to let me know that my experience was not a drug-induced hallucination. It was an actual experience, and I really had to get onto a different path. And so like all of these divine coincidences, miracles, and synchronicities started to find their way to me. Like all of my drug dealers that I had been dealing with for over a decade, they all simultaneously decided to change their lives and stop selling drugs. I'm talking about men that did not know each other. They all on the exact same day made the decision that they were out of the game. So I had no way to get what I needed. And I had this physical dependency to opiates, to heroin. And I found myself on day 3 of withdrawal, and I was so sick. I mean, like, sicker than I had ever been in my 20 plus years of using opiates. And I felt what I imagined my parents felt like in their moment of desperation. And I thought, I'm going to have to die to make this pain stop. Like there's nothing that I can do. And then I heard a voice, and it told me that I could request what I wanted fixed. And I was in the throes of desperation. So I was like, okay, strange voice, I'll bite. I want to no longer be physically dependent to this drug. And they told me to lay back and to count backwards from 10. And as I started to count down, I saw these 2 little men manifest in my mind's eye. And they were wearing white lab coats. They had these big bulbous noses and these little lawnmowers in front of them. And as I counted down, they started walking through every crevice of my mind. And as they walked through and mapped out my mind, I felt these intense hot tingles start to take over my head. And I knew that something was happening. And when they were finished mapping out my mind, there was this bright white flash. And in that flash, I was instantaneously healed out of day 3 of heroin withdrawal. I mean, like moments before, I was sick all over myself, writhing in pain, welcoming death. And then all of a sudden I was completely well and healed and fine. And, like I threw myself on the ground, on my knees, crying out, how could this be happening to me? I don't even believe in this. Like you could not have picked a more unworthy subject to bestow this kind of grace on. And for the contrast, I was a prostitute. I was a drug addict. I was an orphan to suicide. I was a liar, a manipulator, a thief. I was a rapist. I was a racist. I was all of the things that you would think would make you unworthy of grace. And there I was, completely covered and blanketed in the loving kindness of the divine. And, like after this experience, I obviously thought I was the second coming of Christ. I was like, I can heal people. I ran out on the New York City subway system and I started like evangelizing and proselytizing. And I was like laying hands on homeless drug addicts. And I was like, I can heal you. Believe, believe. And it was chaotic. It was so crazy what I was doing. But I had like this newfound faith and this experience. I had no idea what was going on, but I wanted to share it with other people. And thank goodness for spiritual integration, because I've found some balance in my life today, and I don't do things like that anymore. But I was spending a lot of time on the subway system because I was like trying to heal the masses, and I found myself on a train. And I had no destination, and the train car was completely empty, which is very rare in New York in the middle of the day. And this man appeared across from me, and he was wearing a 12-step fellowship necklace. And if you're unfamiliar with 12-step fellowship, it's a system. There's 12 steps, and it's peer-to-peer recovery for people who are either alcoholics or drug addicts, or there's a sex addicts fellowship. Like, there's a fellowship for everything. This man happened to be wearing the 12-step fellowship for drug addicts. And I knew the symbol because I had tried it before. And I heard this voice and it said, that's your path. Follow him to a meeting. And I did. I asked this stranger on the train if I could go to a meeting with him. And I went to a couple of more meetings over the next couple of days. And I knew that this was going to be my path. And I walked into a women's meeting the next day. And when I entered recovery, I did not look the way that I look now. I was like very skinny. My skin was gray. I was super sunken in. I had lost most of my teeth. Thank you, recovery, for letting me buy some teeth in my life today. And I had picked these huge holes in my face and on my arms because I was completely convinced that bugs lived inside me. And so I would cut myself open trying to get them out. I mean, like, my addiction really rocked my world. It really made me into an animal. And when I walked into this women's meeting, this woman grabbed me. I mean, obviously she could tell the state that I was in. But she grabbed me like she knew me. And she hugged me so tight. And she whispered in my ear and she said, you are worthy of all the love in the universe. You are worthy of all the love in the universe. And it was the same message that I heard in my spiritual experience from my father and my boyfriend, the same exact wording. And I just knew that I was on the right path. And I went to another meeting the next day and I found myself in this big, gigantic meeting of like 75, 80 people. And I realized that I don't know how to be a person. I don't know how to be a human without using drugs. And I definitely don't know how to be a spiritual person. Nobody ever taught me any of that stuff. And what am I going to do? And how am I going to figure this out? And I heard a voice in my head. It told me to turn my head to the right. And I realized that sitting 2 seats away from me was the program director of a women's therapeutic community, a long-term rehab here in Brooklyn where I live. And I just had a thought that I didn't know how to be a person. And then I'm sitting right next to a woman whose life's purpose, passion, and profession is teaching women how to be women again after the use of drugs and alcohol. And so I knew that it was a sign and I had to talk to her, but I didn't know how to do that. Like if she had drugs and I wanted that, I would talk to her in a second, like no problem. But she had recovery. Like she had something else that I really needed and wanted. And I didn't know how to ask her to help me. And so I was getting my courage up like the whole meeting, like punching the air inside my head and like doing jumping jacks and push-ups. And I'm like, you could do this. Like, you're going to live a new life. Come on, we got this. And the meeting ends and I walk over to where she is and she's gone. She left the meeting early. And I felt totally defeated and deflated. And with my head hanging, I walked to the bus to go home. And when I stepped onto the bus, that woman was sitting right there. She left the meeting early and was somehow on the exact same bus as me. And I ran up to her totally manic. And I was like, oh my God, I think that you're an angel. You're sent from heaven. You're here on earth just for me. I want to talk to you in there. But of course I couldn't talk to you in there because you're here. And I can't believe that you're here. And this is totally crazy and divine. And I really need help. Can you please help me? And she said, yeah, we can help you. Come by tomorrow. We have a bed. And that sentence changed my whole life without my permission. And I went to that program the very next day with just the clothes on my back. I didn't have anything to take. And, I started my new life. I started this new journey in recovery and reprogramming and integrating my spiritual experience. And let me tell you, like being in a long term rehab with 25 other women is not pajama parties and pillow fights. Okay. It is serious strife, it's hardcore. I still don't know how I survived it some days. But I did. And they let me go to school while I was there, and I became a peer advocate. I have a job in the recovery field today. I have a job of service. I get to give back. Like in active addiction, I was a prostitute. And not only would I prostitute myself, but I would manipulate other women. I would get them strung out on drugs so that I could prostitute them to make money for my own addiction. And today I have this amazing opportunity to make a universal amends, and I assist women on their healing journeys today. And that's more than I ever, ever, ever could have thought for myself. And, like I've manifested a life for myself today that I will not risk losing. And so every day I consciously make a decision that I choose recovery today. It doesn't matter that I had some sort of profound experience. Like I am just as vulnerable as any addict to relapse and destroying my life all over again. So I've found a lot of tools that help me on this path. And I've been able to develop my spirituality around it. So when I went into treatment, I had like this insatiable thirst for knowledge. I wanted to know everything. I had never used my mind before. This vocabulary that I have today, this did not exist 4.5 years ago. The only vocabulary that I had in my life before was just this long laundry list of drugs that I used and how much money it cost to be with me. And, just this is all from the awakening process and from really developing myself at this super late stage in my life, And I found all the spiritual texts that I really got a lot out of. One of the main ones that I study in my life is A Course in Miracles. And if you're unfamiliar with what that is, it's a channeled message from Jesus. And it's a metaphysical text. It's very challenging to understand at first. I read a dozen books about A Course in Miracles before I actually got the course itself. And I have a wonderful study group, a beautiful community, A Course in Miracles community that I attend on Monday nights. And we read the text together, and I've done the workbook lessons all the way through. It's a reprogramming, and I really love it so, so much. And, I belong to 12-Step Fellowship. That's a very spiritual program. And I work the 12 steps. And again, that's another reprogramming tool. And I study the Baha'i faith. And if you're unfamiliar with what that is, it's the world's youngest religion. It believes in the oneness of religions and the oneness of humanity. And it also combines the conceptions of science and spirituality. And I'm not a Baha'i. I don't subscribe to any particular religion, but I really resonate with their scripture. And I also belong to a group for near-death experiencers and spiritual experiencers on the IANS platform. That's the International Association for Near-Death Studies. And these are my communities. I have community in my life today. I was the most isolated, depraved, derelict drug addict that you could ever even imagine. And I was completely alone on this path. And today I have manifested the members of my soul family, the communities that help me spiritually grow and evolve. And my life is profoundly different. And you don't have to die to get a different kind of life. If you're unhappy with something, there's so many tools out there that I've found that have helped me on this path. And I'm going to stop talking now. Thank you for giving me all that space and staying so present.
No, I appreciate it. I was actively listening. I was saying you explain it very eloquently. I mean, you see the pictures, which helps a lot of people. I do not think in pictures, and so therefore it helped me a lot. Um, how important is community? I mean, because like for your drug addict life and for this life.
Yeah, both are so important and they're completely interchangeable. For me, community is one of the number one tools that I use in staying on this path. And, my recovery path and my spiritual path are the same thing. Like they're very, very intertwined. And, some of my spiritual communities don't have anything to do with recovery, but my recovery community has everything to do with my spirituality for sure. And yeah, I feel like I need others to uplift me. Like I need to
Yeah.
check in with other people, because if I'm left by myself, I'm also with the last person that I used drugs with. I'm also with the last person who ruined my life. And so I need to be surrounded by other people. I need to see other reflections of myself to figure so that I can see myself coming. And yeah, community has profoundly changed my life.
Nice. I pause a lot when I talk, so you'll have to forgive me for that. Um, it's a lesson I learned young that if I didn't want to sound stupid, don't talk so quickly. Uh, I That's a lot to unpack. It really is. I mean, there's the questions were all there, but then it's just I'm just reliving the heaviness. I mean, do you ever feel? How long was it before you felt like you no longer had that pull back to that lifestyle?
Wow, that's a really good question. I can't really like track it down to like a single day. And for me, it's a daily thing. There's some times in my day where I still like, if I forget and I'm like, oh yeah, maybe a drink would be okay. And so one of the ways that I have like arrested my dis-ease of addiction a day at a time, I like to do character development around the different pieces of myself. So, okay, I do a lot of shadow work. That's like a term that you'll hear in the spiritual world, shadow work. It's all in the Western world. We have a type of therapy about it called parts work, internal family systems. So what I do is I just dissect the different versions of myself. So, like, I have an addict version of myself, and he's a man. I see him as a man in my mind's eye. His name is Richard. He has like an outfit, a personality, and I can tell his voice from my spirit's voice because I've divided them and because I've compartmentalized them. And, like I have a lot of other manifestations of the dis-ease of addiction that come up in my life. When I let go of drugs, I developed a lot of really nasty stuff with eating disorders. And so my eating disorder has a face, a name, a shape, all those
But
things.
you definitely don't want to be a Richard. Don't be a Richard.
Right, right. I don't want to be a Richard. Exactly. It all just like worked out that was like the perfect name for him.
I
But
have a shirt that I sell apparel, and one of my shirts is in quotations. It says, "Don't be a dick." The Bible.
nice,
So,
nice. Yeah,
yeah,
I
it
love
makes me
that.
think of that.
That's great. I might have to buy that one just to wear it around to remind me. So yeah, those are some of the tools that I use, and I use those same tools to also develop my light side as well. So my spirit guides, my angels, my guidance team, they all have shapes and names and faces, and it helps me to connect to the divine in that way because I know that I have a straight line to source. I have a straight line to God that I can commune directly with God. But sometimes it's a little bit easier for me to like talk to my spirit guide, Philip, because he seems a little bit more relatable. I'm like, all right, Philip, I need help with this today. And Philip can help me. But I know that it's all interconnected. And these are just some of the tools that I use that really help me on the journey because there's so many things in the world outside of my recovery community and my spiritual communities that tempt me like on a daily basis. And so I got to stay like spiritually suited up. I have like this spiritual armor on me all the time. And a lot of it has to do with the literature that I read, the journaling that I do, the people that I surround myself with. They also keep me spiritually armored up. And yeah, it's a day-to-day thing. And I don't know if I don't have complete freedom from my obsessive thoughts. They still exist, but I have tools today to deter me from acting out on them.
So, uh, do you meditate?
I don't have like a very strict meditation practice. I do like 5 minutes in the morning, 5 minutes at night. I also exercise, so I use that as meditation time as
Yeah.
well.
It's a lot of people are confused about meditation. They think meditation is just what you see like yogis and
Yeah.
Buddhists do and stuff. And I explain meditation. The only thing it is prayer is talking to God, source, spirit, whatever you want to say. That's the one way communication. Meditating is simply just listening.
Mm-hmm.
And around in the Bible Belt, people tend to think of meditation like it's going to open doorway and pathways to the devil, which everything's the devil down here. So whatever you do, you can blame it on the devil. But I try to remind people, I'm like, the devil is you. It's your
Right.
ego.
Yes.
It's you gotta, I don't care if you really believe in a divine entity called the devil or anything like that. It's just whatever. It sounds just like the ego.
Right.
Fix the ego, you'll be able to squash that devil. Um,
Yes.
but meditating, I suck at it, like the whole sitting still things when I have back surgery and stuff. So a few of them, so it's not that comfortable. But I've found just sitting in quiet, and when I work out is when I meditate
Mhm.
also. But I usually I have a resting I'm going to kill you face, so it's always like this. But when I'm working out, it's even meaner. I mean, people don't approach me. Nobody ever asked me to wear a mask through the whole COVID thing ever, because it's not a face you ask that. And but I have found meditation actually, helped me clear my mind of all the clutter, because it used to be where it was constantly just thinking and stuff. Um, a lot of people don't quite understand when they'll hear your story about living a drug induced life and having all that trauma, but your whole inner thought process has been completely changed, has it not? I mean, like, you're not even the same person inside your head.
Definitely not. Totally rewired. But that took a lot of vigilance. That
Yeah,
was that was up to me, you know. Well, not just me, obviously God, the divine,
yeah,
like assisting me along the way. But reprogramming did not happen from the spiritual experience.
yeah,
Like I said, I went right back to using drugs as soon as the spiritual experience was over. I went right back into doing what I had always done. And so, yeah, the rewiring, again, it's a daily practice, daily vigilance, and staying aligned with spiritual principles.
you're working with basically a lot of people that were like you were. Is that about right?
Mm.
Do you find helping do you find your experience as in the drug addict or the experience of the spirituality, which one do you think probably helps more dealing with it?
Wow, that's a really cool question. Thank you for that. So, I have a day job. I work at a clinic in Harlem, New York. And in that role, I work as a recovery peer advocate, which basically just means that my whole job is self disclosure. My job is to let clients know, hey, I'm in recovery. If I can do it, you can do it. And they pay me a salary for that. It's wild. I also have a private coaching business where I assist people through transformation or manifesting, things like that. So I feel like when it comes to my private coaching business, because people are seeking me out, my spirituality probably is a little bit more aligned with that. And then in my day job, my recovering self is much more aligned with that. So yeah, I mean a combination of both because it's all really interconnected. But definitely, I would feel like for my day job, I dial into the addict much more because I'm surrounded by addiction all day long.
Yeah. That that's got to be pretty heavy. I mean, something to really difficult to deal with because you've been there, because everything is going to me, once you become a self-reflected person, you start seeing yourself in everybody. And it makes it where you're either going to hate everybody or you're going to start feeling empathy for everybody because you realize I was there. Um, but the seeing people hurting like that, is it hard not to take that home with you?
So I love that you said that. And yeah, like I do see everyone as a reflection of me. So when I'm at work, I see a past version of myself, or I see a future version of myself if I don't stay vigilant in my recovery and spiritual practice. And so for me, that's what the reflection is. The reflection is always finding compassion for the past version of myself, because that's what I'm dealing with all day, but also recognizing that I'm just one decision away from being on the other side of the desk. So I have to remember that. And so it keeps things really fresh for me. It helps me stay really, really close to recovery. And, like thanks to the internet and the pandemic, like 12-step meetings are virtual now. So when I'm at work, I always have a 12-step meeting on in the background so that I see faces that I know, I hear recovery that I can admire and, like get something from, because I got to stay grounded in recovery. And I definitely don't take it home with me. But it took me a while to figure out how to do that too, how to like detach from the work narrative into like my personal life narrative.
Do you ever find yourself being a little over judgmental towards anybody like drug dealers or anything like that, or even the police? Because obviously living on the other side, you probably weren't too big of a fan of the police department.
You know what? I never got busted really. That was like not
Really?
supposed to be part of my story, which is awesome. I mean, I have been arrested before.
Yeah.
But like it wasn't, yeah, it was really only once or twice that I was. And yeah, I think that I don't really hold a lot of judgment. I think if anything, I'm experiencing. I mean, I do judge people. I'm not going to say that I don't judge people.
Well,
I
you're human.
don't. Yeah, right. I don't necessarily judge people like police or anything like that. I don't judge drug dealers either. I really believe in spiritual autonomy. So everybody is operating out of their own system. And this is the path that they've chosen for themselves for whatever reason. Again, like my human cannot comprehend why someone would choose a life of addiction or being a drug dealer or anything like that. But I really truly have faith and belief that everything is always working out for the highest good. And there's nothing that I can do to get involved with it to make it be any different. My only mission here is to be a shining light, an example that we really do recover. And that if recovery is possible for me, it's literally possible for anybody. If transformation is possible for me, it's literally possible for anybody. And so I try to keep that in mind when I'm judging people. Like, okay, if I can transform, so can they.
Yeah. That's why it's so powerful. I can't think. I mean, not to shit talk you or anything. I'm not meaning to do that, but you were probably one of the more shitty type of people
Oh,
at that
definitely.
time in your life, and I think that's great, because you can give a testimony that most people will never be able to give. It's like trying to get marriage advice from a Catholic priest, which never made sense to me. You need somebody with experience because we trust people that have been there, that have
Mm,
done that. You don't ask, if you're in the military, you don't ask war advice from somebody that's always been under a desk. Hey, how's war going to be? Can you handle it? Kind of stuff. You ask the soldiers. That's why my company is called Soldier of God, because we're all soldiers of God, whether you call it, say, God, source, universe. I don't care. We're all on our own mission. My motto is Bellator Itinerarium, which is it's the journey of the warrior.
mm,
Because again, you're all on your separate paths. You're not born that way. And you said something very powerful earlier that I say a lot, as of lately. I said nothing happens to you; everything happens for you. And once you start seeing that and seeing the lessons, well, why this happen? Well, I'll give you an example. I was supposed to have surgery on Wednesday of my when I was 7. I stepped in front of my mom's boyfriend, and he punched me square in the face, and it deviated my septum, like completely. So breathing out my nose was hard, and I'm not a mouth breather, so breathing always sucked. Well, I was supposed to have the surgery. I woke up early, and I'm usually working in graveyards, but I got up early, and my blood sugar was just shot. And it's never like that. I mean, I've had 7 surgeries, and I've never had that issue when I got up in the morning. And so I ate some chocolate. Actually, I ate a lot of chocolate. And you're not supposed to eat at all when you have surgery. Well, when we went there, um, I started asking questions about, because I knew I had, we had this podcast, and there was also a business conference this past couple of days that I was supposed to attend. And he said, "Yeah, you don't want to do anything for the first few days." He said, "You're going to have something over your face, everything, He said, "You're going to sound stuffy." So this podcast would have sucked. I would have had, he said, I would cancel that podcast. And then I wouldn't have been able to go to that business conference. And so I could sit there and say, he said I couldn't eat. They checked my stomach there and they said, "Yeah, you cannot have surgery because if you aspirate, you could
Right.
possibly die, over a simple surgery." And so they canceled it. Well, here's the thing: if they wouldn't have canceled it today, while I've been struggling with my t-shirt company because I'm like a retard with a yo-yo. I'm just flailing all over the place trying to get this going. And the only time I can sell my shirts is when I'm at conferences because people see them and they love my shirts. But I know nothing about e-commerce, nothing about online. Well, and I've been doing this. I've met a lot of people over the years. Been working on this for 3 years. Well, I met a guy today when I decided to leave early for this podcast. I run into him outside when I was leaving. We would have never spoke at all. We ended up talking. He talked about, I have a service dog that's a pit bull in training right now. We start talking about the dog. Well, he's a serial entrepreneur and he's very interested in my company. And we're supposed to be talking later, and he talked about the business and stuff. Then I wouldn't have been able to do that. And I wouldn't have been able to have this podcast today, And so I truly believe everything happens for you. But if I wouldn't have looked for it, I could have been disgruntled and, oh, I don't want to sit there and wait and hold off. I waited for so long to have this. It's like, I don't think you should, and I don't think you are the type to regret anything about your past, about going through that, all of the bad stuff, because you have a gift to be able to, even if you never had the near death experience or whatever you want to call it, you have a gift that you can literally change somebody's life because they will look at that and say, "Oh, I thought mine was bad." And they're like, "If you can do it, I can do it." You know, and that's a very powerful tool to have because a lot of people will try to give advice. They're like, "Oh, you can do it. You got to," they have to be these motivational speakers and stuff that have never experienced life. And that's hard to, like me, I have a pretty big BS monitor. If I see that you've never actually experienced anything, but you're trying to make me feel better, you know, it's not going to work. So I applaud you. I mean, I have super respect when I heard your story and everything because I've heard a lot of stories, in law enforcement. I saw a lot of things, and most people never even have the desire to get out of their situation. They just do it.
Yeah. I think that it's not that people don't have the desire, it's that they're not educated or informed, or they're not in that level of awareness. Like, so even me, like it took me so long to get it. This is not the first time that I've like tried to be clean off of drugs and alcohol. I have tried before, but never with any real intention because I didn't even know that I could have a good life because I grew up or I was surrounded by struggle. And I thought, well, life is just a struggle. And so if I have to struggle, I want to at least be high if I'm going to have to struggle. And I didn't even know that you could have a life that does not look like struggle. Like I have a life today where things just attract into my environment, like the things that are meant for me. And it's just by focusing a small amount of energy each day towards my spiritual growth. And if I do that, my world explodes. I mean, like, obviously, I have a testimony of rock bottom to outer space. And there's so many other people that do as well. And I think really the one thing that I'm, like very proud of is like my courage, like this spiritual principle of being courageous.
Yeah.
Because I'm not scared to share all of the really ugly parts of my story. Like my story is not just like, whoa, poor her. My story is also I did a lot of that victimizing to other people.
Yeah.
And today I have a lot of freedom in my life around it because I work the 12 steps in a 12-step program, because I have like spiritual teachers and mentors in my life, and guilt and shame don't weigh me down anymore. And
Yeah.
I've learned the tools that helped me stay free of that, because guilt and shame are like always right here. Like every time I
Yeah.
tell the story, they're like, "Oh my God, aren't you embarrassed? How are you saying this stuff to somebody else? This is going to go on the internet. You're crazy." And I today I have like angels that just kind of like bat those thoughts away. And they say like, "No, this is what you're meant to do. Like you're meant to stand in your spiritual truth, your human truth, no matter how ugly it was. It's not that way anymore." And if I can get that kind of freedom, I know other people can too.
I don't sense victimhood at all when I see you. I just I don't feel the energy of victim, even shame, which is important because shame I think can make you go back into that state. Um, you because even though you're ashamed, at least you felt better when you're high. And so that's what you end up doing is you're like, I might be ashamed now, but I felt better. So I don't want to feel shame anymore. You shouldn't be ashamed. It was your journey. It was your warrior's path. It taught you. You're the the Navy SEAL of this life. You know, it taught you stuff that you cannot read in a book. I mean, you can't even tell it in a story. But you telling that story helps out people. But it's it coming from your voice. I couldn't retell your story and it have as big of an impact.
Mm.
Like, well, there's one chick that I talked to that was, no, it needs to come from you. And you, I hope you're starting a podcast, right?
I do have a podcast with the International Association for Near Death Studies. I host a podcast for them. I have it's on the IANS videos YouTube. I also have my own YouTube and my own social media. It's Buddha Betty. It's a play on
Yeah.
words. And yeah, I'm really active on social media. I love making Instagram lives and just being like a real person,
I'm
and
going to
I
put,
feel like, yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, I'm going to put all your stuff down in the description because I think it's important and
Yes.
people need to hear it. People need to see it because, uh, the world needs more of that. I get on the world. I became a Christian in 2017. By the time 2020 came, I had a very, very spiritual experience that sent me to the ER like 3 times in 4.5 days. Didn't sleep. It's a rather, not a long story, but it's just, it's powerful and it changed me. I had a connection with something there that scared the hell out of me. And since then, my religiousness left because when you first become a Christian, kind of like when you had your experience, all of a sudden you're like a zealot. You just go out and you want to do all this and stuff. And I found myself judging and like, oh God, he's a Muslim. We need to go save his soul, you know. And now I'm like, no, he's good. That's not my purpose.
Yeah.
But after that experience, I started feeling more love towards people, the vibration, and a lot of people don't understand vibration, but scientifically speaking, we are nothing but, I mean, I think we vibrate at 432 hertz. That's our natural vibration of our bodies. But there's all types, like 528 is considered the vibration that heals, but regardless, the higher the vibration, and I found a lot of Christians actually believe in it too. And I don't understand. To me, when somebody says believe in something, I'm like, but it's real. It's kind of like saying believe in oxygen. Well, it's real, whether you see it or not. But raising vibration literally just means that making things better, happier, nicer, lovelier, putting more love into the world. And people need that because there's a lot of darkness, but as much darkness as a person has experienced in their life, it is just a grain of sand on a beach, as to the love that's in the universe.
Oh my
And a lot of
goodness.
people don't ever get to see that because if you're in this world, you're in this basement of hell, you don't see what's outside of that basement. You're going to think the whole world's like that. And
Yeah.
I think people need to see that just because you lived in that hell doesn't mean you need to stay there. And there's so much more benefit out of helping somebody else than anything. I mean, because we're all the same. I mean, we're all made out of. I say it like this, and I've said it. If I say it once, I've said it 1,000 times. Even though I came up with it about a week ago, but still, if you know, I was trying to explain God and us and our connection with each other, and I said, and I use God because I'm in the Bible Belt. People are more comfortable with that. But I don't care if you say source or what. God is everything. So even if you said universe, you're saying God. But God is the ocean, and we're the raindrops. We're all connected. We're all part of God. You can't tell us the difference between us, especially when we get together and we get back in the ocean. So when I'm hurting you, I'm hurting me and I'm hurting God. When I'm loving you, I'm loving on you, God, and loving on myself. But also when I'm hurting myself, I'm hurting you and I'm hurting God. So it's important to show love to everybody, even if you don't like them, because, you're still on a journey that taught you there, because no matter how bad I can judge you, if I grew up like you did and experienced what you did, I'd probably believe in exactly the same thing you do. I'd probably be a drug and stuff. I mean, because it's the rare exception, the one off, that somebody doesn't end up being what their environment was. My brother and sister both ended up on drugs, alcohol. I mean, in prison. My sister then eventually became a Jehovah's Witness. I'm not really for sure which is worse, but I'm still working it out. That's a joke. I swear. I have friends that are Jehovah's Witness. I mean, you believe what you want to believe as long as you're not hurting somebody. But regardless, we all got to understand each other and understand that we're on a path. And if you're not doing something to help their path become better, then leave them alone.
Right.
And because all you're going to do is hurt them. Because I could sit there and shame you because of the way your life was, and I tell a lot of, talking to Christians, I tell them, I'm like, would you shame Paul because he used to be Saul? People change. Let them change. And they're only going to change in their time and God's time. All you can do is be the light to somebody. You can't set them on fire.
Yeah, I love that. And I will say, like, I've shared my story a lot. And the only time that I ever get negative comments is from Christians. And and I understand it. Like, I
Yeah.
understand how when you see things only through this one lens, it's really challenging to accept that there's other lenses to see things through.
Yeah.
And, like, even when I first had my experience, I was convinced that I was supposed to be an evangelical Christian. I felt born again. And so I wanted to become born again. And so I started trying on, I thought that I had to find my religion. What's my religion? What is it? And so I started trying on all these things, and I went to an evangelical church, and then I went to an all Black Baptist church. And I was like this one white chick, like singing and
That's fun.
dancing. And it was, and they accepted me. Like, they
Yeah.
loved me. They didn't care that I looked different from them. But, like, could I say the same thing if they walked into a space where it was all white people? Like, would they,
Yeah.
and it was, it was breaking down a lot of barriers in my mind from
Yeah.
the way that I grew up and the thought systems that were put into my mind before I could even have a conscious thought. And then I realized, and then I read the Quran. And when I read the Quran, I thought, I think I'm supposed to convert to Islam. And I just kept reaching for somebody else's idea of God, for some
Yeah.
man-made idea of God. And I didn't realize that I could construct my own. Like, I can have a very personal relationship with God. I don't have to have somebody else commune with God for me. I have a direct line. All I have to do is, like, pick up that phone to customer service, and God is right there on the other end waiting to help me. And so I kept bouncing around from thing to thing. And then I finally realized that I don't have to convert to anybody else's idea of anything. I can cherry pick things out of each faith and construct my own spirituality around it. And I have, and it's really freeing for me. And, like, I'm a big fan of Jesus. Like, I definitely felt kind of like that Christ light in my experience. And that's why I really love A Course in Miracles so much. And if you're
Yeah.
unfamiliar with this book, I mean, like I said, I read all the books about the book before I got it, because, like, it's pretty thick.
Yeah.
But
I've
for
read it.
me, yeah, I thought, like, this makes more sense to me. Like, how could Jesus leave us here all this time with no more words? Like,
Yeah.
that would be impossible. And for me, it really helped open up that door inside my heart to a different perception, to the reprogramming that needs to take place, and for me to realize that the second coming is within me, and I exude that out in my life today, and that, yeah, things aren't meant to be interpreted so literally.
Yeah. A lot of people, they only know how to view things from the perspective that was told to them.
Right.
I get a lot of people that will say, that's not subjective, that's objective. I was like, no, it's subjective. And I've explained things, and I had a woman on my podcast, that is an Aramaic Christian minister. Her family is from the Near East. She's first generation American, and but she's lived here her whole life, so you couldn't tell that she was anything but American. But she explained, they kind of joke about, they call it colonizer Christianity. They said it's not the same. They
Mm-hmm.
take things way different because if you were if you understand people from different areas, you understand that they have different idioms. They can say the same thing. Like, you would probably have no idea what I mean when I say, I had to walk clear back to the back 40. Um, but if I told you that 40 is 40 acres, now do you know what I'm saying?
Okay.
You think you do, because you're like, oh, you had to walk back to the clear 40 acres. I'm like, no, that's not it at all. Actually, all I was saying is I had to walk clear back there. I had to walk way back there. That's all I'm saying. But that's the way it is with back then in Italy and Greece. They could translate the words, but they couldn't translate the meanings because they didn't understand the meanings. England, same thing, but you can't get convinced people of that. You can't, and
Right.
I'm not trying to. I tell people, believe what you want to believe. If this is the way you want to believe it, then I can't tell you any differently. When I read the Bible, I listen to what I hear. And I tell them, I was like, I used to completely not believe in the Bible because, well, I studied the Bible. I wasn't raised a Christian. I was raised around Christians that really didn't like me. Well, they wanted to save my soul. They saw this kid with two black eyes that looked like a cancer patient. He cared so much about my soul and whether I was going to heaven or hell, but they'd never asked me what my home life was. So I still lived in hell, you know? And so I knew they didn't really care about me. And people say, you have a disdain for Christianity. I'm like, no, I have a disdain for a lot of Christians. I'm like,
Mm.
Jesus, I love, he's an awesome guy. And I told an atheist friend of mine who I said, and it was funny because we're at a dealership that's a Christian dealership, really good guys and stuff. But that's when I started becoming a Christian. And but they were all like, "Oh, we'll get him converted." I'm like, "That's not how it works." I went in there one day because I'm like, I don't like people assuming anything about somebody. It's kind of like when people say, "Well, we don't worship Buddha." Well, neither do Buddhists. I mean, they're not worshiping him as a god. That's not the way they see him. Their his teachings. But anyways, I told this guy, this friend of mine, I said, if non-believers, atheists, even Christians, if they would meet Jesus the way Jesus introduced himself as a man, that I was like, I don't see how you wouldn't love the guy. Jesus never walked up to somebody and said, "Hey, I'm God, worship me." It's not how it worked at all. He never did that. In fact, nothing was even like that until Paul, after Jesus died. But people are so stuck on that. I'm like, whether you believe Jesus is divine or not, I'm not arguing that. I won't even tell people what I believe. But the lessons he taught were natural lessons. They were universal, that were taught among a lot of belief systems. Buddhists, yogis, Hindus, they all taught a lot of the same lessons. But the Jews never heard of it before because they were so stuck in the rules, the Pharisees. I came up with the term Pharisaical Christians, which is a good percentage of Christians. They're so stuck on the book, the rules of what the books say to do, and they'll say, well, the Bible says not to do this. That's Pharisaical. That's religious, even though they're so, I'm not religious, but you just said the Bible told you to do this. It's a personal relationship with God. We're all on our own mission. If I want to change or if I need to change, I'll be convicted to change. If I'm not
Yeah.
convicted to change, but you can't tell me because God uses the broken to heal the broken, you know,
Yeah.
such as
I,
you had to be broken to be able to heal people that are broken.
Yes, wounded healers. There's a bunch of us, and
Yeah.
I think one thing for me that really sticks with me is that I my belief system is based around spiritual principles. Spiritual principles are honesty, open-mindedness, willingness, acceptance, tolerance, patience, empathy, compassion. Those are spiritual principles. So if I'm having a thought, is that thought aligned with a spiritual principle? And I feel like when it comes to judgment, against others, like it's
Yeah.
never going to be aligned with a spiritual principle. And that spiritual principle of open-mindedness is the one that saved me from myself, saved me
Yeah.
from the programming that was trying to sneak in to make me think that I had to fit into somebody else's box. And so when I started to educate myself and I started to read different kinds of scriptures from different parts of the world, different religions, and I found the underlying theme in every scripture is brotherly love, is unconditional love, is treating your neighbor the way that you'd like to, treat yourself and your neighbor the same. And and that spiritual principle of open-mindedness allowed me into all those different faiths, religions, and cultures to find that that's the underlying theme in every single one. And so I don't need to subscribe to anything. I can just
Yeah.
keep that as my North Star. Like that's my guiding light, is that,
Yeah.
universal love of one another.
I appreciate that. I like that. If people would start adhering to that instead of, well, we need to save their soul from hell. I'm like, well, if it's not changing them, why do it? I mean, if you're not getting them to change, because I've never seen anybody change because you told them to,
Never.
do you want to go to
I've
heaven or
never,
hell?
it's never ever happened ever. And it
I'm
never
like,
would happen.
yeah, I'm like, if you don't believe in hell, why would you be scared of hell? I
The thing
mean,
is that most people are living in hell
yeah,
already. Like, Earth could be considered hell to lots of people. And it
yeah,
was for me for my whole life. I thought, damn, I'm stuck in purgatory. This place sucks.
yeah,
And then one day I had to change the thought and I realized that this is actually heaven. And if
yeah,
my life is going in a way where it doesn't feel like that this is heaven, then I need to get myself readjusted and realigned because for a long time, I thought that I was trying to get back to the space of the spiritual experience. How can I experience the oneness again? How can I experience God again? I have to get back there. And so at first, I thought that I just had to do recovery to get back to heaven. And so I was like, okay, God, I haven't used drugs in 14 days. Can I come home yet? And then no response. And then I'm like, okay, I made it to 60 days. Like who's coming to get me? Like, I feel like a kid that got left at school. Like, is someone coming to get me with the station wagon? Like, what's happening? And then as I slowly started to educate myself and find the scripture and the spiritual texts that really have given me so much of my life today, I realized that it's not about going back to heaven. It's about bringing heaven here.
yeah,
And so every day I construct heaven on earth for myself. And I don't succeed in every second of every day, but I can always pull myself back, even if it's right before I go to bed and I'm reflecting on my day for the last 5 minutes.
yeah,
I can say, okay, these were my heavenly moments today. And tomorrow I'm going to try for just as many, if not more, heavenly moments.
yeah. That's powerful. No, it's trying to find the right words, and it's not easy to find. A lot of people, they want so bad that they're fighting several demons at one time. Even people that are really good people that are going to church and all that stuff. One of the demons they're fighting is trying to belong and trying to subscribe to this belief system that they were told is right. And I'm not going to say they're wrong or anything, but if it is causing separation, Jesus, said, "Heaven, the kingdom of heaven is inside you." And that is a universal truth. You're right. Heaven is here on earth. It's inside you. And the thing is that you need to make your outside match your inside. The kingdom of heaven is inside you. And so therefore you need to bring it out, and a lot, and I hear a lot of, and it's unfortunate that you're absolutely right. Most of the hate comes from that I've noticed comes from Christians. Not all Christians. I'm not even going to say the majority, but the outspoken Christians. I get a lot of hate from them because of what I say. And I don't care. I said 100% of Christians completely could disagree with me. I'm still going to have the same lesson. But I've actually been finding, I've had friends that are, I call them Facebook friends, that have sent me stuff like articles that have said exactly what I say. There's an author, Jim Palmer. He's wrote a lot of books and stuff, and it was just amazing because he literally described Jesus the way I described him, but nobody told me. I didn't read it in a book or anything. I literally just listened to God. And that's what he said. And he said, this is what Jesus is. This is who Jesus is. He's not the person y'all think he is. He's teaching love. Love is the most important thing. And God is a part of all of this. It's like I've used this example. If let's say you're making a clay vase and you get some clay and you get some sand to add color and stuff, and you mix it in there, and then you put some water in there and you bake it and you make this vase. Can you take that sand out of it? Can you separate the clay out of it? You can't. It's always going to be a part of it. So God is always a part of you. He's not locked in some kind of cage, he or she or whatever. I've gotten some slack because one person said, well, you're just feeding into patriarchy saying he. I was like, no, he is just a term people use because that's what makes them feel more comfortable.
Yeah.
That's what they understand. But in all honesty, God doesn't need a penis. I mean, that's just what we say is he. But you can't separate God from us. You can't, which means that God isn't the person that you're sitting there looking at that you absolutely can't stand. So when you're hating on that person, you're hating on God too. Just love the God that's in them. You may not like parts of them, but just remember there's a God in them and you inside them. And a lot of times when you're hating on somebody else, you're just hating the part of you that you don't like.
That's
you
it.
know and people struggle with that because they're so when you're told what you're supposed to believe and you're not allowed to free think, because once you start free thinking, you're like, what? I said the other day, I was like, reincarnation's in the Bible. They're like, no, it's not. I was like, well, it's in there twice. That's in the current edition. If you go back hundreds of years, there's a lot more things on reincarnation. They're like, what part? I said, okay, Jesus saying, who do they say I am? And they said, well, they say you're Elijah. That was 2,000 years before this. He said, no, that was John the Baptist. He came and gone. What do you think that's saying? But the only answer I get from Christians is, oh, that's just taken out of context. They just want to
Mm,
hate anything that's against what they believe. Even though I spoke to Jews and Jews still believe in reincarnation, you know, but it doesn't matter. I'm like, what does it matter? It's like people arguing over flat Earth. Right now, it seems like flat Earth things seems to be a big thing, and I'm like, people ask, well, what do you believe? I was like, I don't care. It doesn't matter.
right.
I'm like, what's it going to change? You
Yeah.
know, and it's just people want to argue and find something that separates us from somebody else. All these groups out there that say, oh, you got to hate other people because of the way they look, because they oppress us. Like, nobody oppresses you. You oppress you.
Yeah.
I'm like, you quit oppressing yourself. Quit putting yourself in a box. Quit putting God in a box. What do you want to do? I've been like manifesting. I've been trying to learn how to manifest, and I've I've always called myself a realist when actually it's more like a pessimist. But I thought I was looking at reality instead of looking at the reality is we create our reality,
Right.
and trying to retrain your brain is not easy to do. And that's just on that, let alone trying to retrain your brain if you've gone through some major trauma, because a lot of it will be subconscious. You won't even notice it. You have no idea what you're trying to fix. So I
Yeah.
went on a rant.
Manifestation is definitely real. And it's only hard if you affirm that it's hard because our thoughts
Yeah.
shape our reality. So be mindful of your words. I'm always being more and more mindful of my words. I realize that I've always been manifesting my reality. My thoughts before were, I'm homeless, I'm a drug addict, I'm a prostitute, I hate my life. And so that was my reality. And today I have different thoughts. I'm divinely connected to source. I have a whole spirit team that guides me on my way. I'm an abundant individual. I love what I do. I love my life. And so that is now my reality today. And it's really just about changing that thought system and then finding the underlying blocks to what can stop the attraction or the assumption from coming in. And, like it really is magic. We live in a magical world. We really do. And once you can step into that realm of spiritual awareness, the whole world of magic can just unfold to you.
Yeah, I tell people I don't like the word supernatural. It's just natural. You just don't know about it.
Yes, yes, yeah.
It's only
Yeah, magic
super because
magic
you
isn't
don't
a
understand.
great magic is not a great word, but like it's the best way that I can describe it because
Yeah,
it's so
it's what
far
we
away.
understand.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know, I said everything that you don't understand is magic. Look at starting a fire. I mean, you walk into you go to certain parts of the Amazon and you have a lighter and you go like that and it starts a fire. These guys never seen that before. They're going to think you're a god.
Yes.
I mean, it's just everything you don't understand is always going to be magical, or it's going to be, and depending on your belief system, it could be demonic because they don't understand it. You know, people kept on saying that experience I had was demonic. I was the devil. You know, they're after you because you're what you're trying to do. And I'm like, but I didn't feel demonic. I just
Right.
felt scared because I didn't understand it. Which for me, I come from a very, when people ask me who my role models was, who raised me, because I didn't have anybody actually teach me things, I said Clint Eastwood and Roseanne Barr. Um, I was like, so when I say, I'm scared, I don't really like saying that out loud. It doesn't feel good, but it was the first time I'd ever been really scared. And, and people think that's weird growing up the way I did. But when you grow up, that's your world. Like
Yeah.
if you think about your world, you put somebody that's never been in it, it probably scared the hell out of them to you. You were comfortable. You knew it,
Yes.
so that wasn't scary. It was scary when my vibration is vibrating at this and this one's vibrating faster and they hit each other. It's a scary feeling. My body literally started convulsing on the left side. Um, but it wasn't demonic. It was my understanding. I didn't understand it, but I got some instant knowledge. And ever since then, I started getting just uh, this claircognizance. I just started completely understanding things that I should have never understood. Nobody ever taught me. And I got this oversensitive feeling of loving everybody, even if I don't like you. I still love you. I don't wish harm on you at all. I want the best for you. And I think we all, if we would just listen to other people's stories, even if they're in the middle, sometimes you don't understand, they're in the middle of their war. So you're hating that person because, yes, that person happens to be a prostitute, but that's somebody's daughter. You know, that's a child of God. That's part of us. It opens the door where you're able to love somebody if you can have empathy for them. But I don't want to take up too much of your time. Tell me, I'm going to give you the floor.
Like we create these spaces and we empower each other in these ways, and we'll give people space to share about spiritual experiences, and they become the new normal. And I really feel like that's the path that we're headed on. And yeah, I think the only thing that I really want to say is your thoughts really do shape your reality. And being aligned with spiritual principles for me has been the catalyst in my spiritual growth and evolvement. Staying in tune with empathy, compassion, unconditional love, honesty, open mindedness, willingness, and knowing that I am a divine co-creator of this experience here, and it's not meant to be one of suffering or sadness. It's meant to be one of overcoming and triumph. And I've definitely experienced that. And so if you're looking for support and you need help in that shift in your own life, please feel free to reach out to me. My information will be in the liner notes of this episode. And again, I'm so grateful for this space, and thank you for this amazing back and forth and engagement with each other.
Hey guys, I want to personally thank everyone for liking and sharing my videos. Uh, if you want to continue to see my content, all you got to do is press that subscribe button and I'll notify you as soon as a new video comes out. I don't get paid for any of this. So if you want to buy some of my merch, like my shirts, like Jesus is a badass or my Don't Be a Dick shirt, You can easily go to my merch store, which is at sogtv.org, which I will have it in the description at every video. So push that, go buy yourself a shirt. I appreciate it. Have a blessed day, and I will see you at the next episode. Thank you.